On May 15, the grand jury of the European Court of Human Rights is going to hear an appeal on the Caster Semenya case. Caster Semenya, a two-time Olympic champion, a three-time world champion in the 800 metres, and of course one of a number of athletes that have basically been wiped out of world athletics because of really strict rules around women who have naturally occurring high levels of testosterone, known as DSDs, differences of sex development. Now, there's a documentary that's been made about Caster and other women that are in this situation titled Category Woman, and it was the winner at the recent International Sports Press Association Awards handed out by AIPS in Spain. I was lucky enough to sit down with the maker of the documentary, Phyllis Ellis, herself an Olympian. She played hockey for Canada back in the 1980s.
I was really pushing to speak to Sebastian Coe, and at the sort of the 11th hour, he was busy or something. I can't remember, but I don't know what the big fear is, and I think that one of the most damaging things, and this is another thing we don't talk about, and I didn't go at it in a heavy way. I inferred it at the beginning of the film, but it was the women athletes that were had the most vitriol coming out of the gate. And you know, the she's a man, and then of course, the loudest athlete ended up doping and losing her medal in London, which was a comeuppance, I think, at the end of the day, and Castor won, got the gold anyway because she was actually doping. So that was the irony of that. But the athletes were brutal. And I have spoken to many athletes who are brutal. And, you know, the idea of fair play also comes up in my mind that, we have a right to play, but we don't have a right to win because somebody else is better than us. And to eliminate, Melissa Bishop was an athlete, a Canadian athlete that came fourth. Margaret Neosavin beat her by a fingernail. And so the three athletes came first, second, third, and she was like literally like a hair behind Margaret, and everyone said, "Oh yeah, the man beat her." And I said, Margaret had a better kick than Melissa Bishop. Melissa Bishop wasn't good enough. She thought she had the bronze 1 second before she crossed the finish line, and Margaret crossed the finish line within less than a tenth of a second. She just wasn't fast enough that day. But everybody's got to find a reason. And then when sort of the large main media and everybody that goes at these women, it creates a story. And that's where journalistic responsibility comes in. How do we speak as journalists or filmmakers about athletes or about women? And when we're saying something, is what we're saying informed and not just an opinion based on fear or based on what we've heard. I think that's also our responsibility. And I think maybe that's why I felt sort of compelled to sort of push and tell the story in the way that I was able to.
And you talk about journalistic responsibility, but again, it's all, the loudness is Western journalists and European journalists and our views of what women should look like. I don't think the journalists from Africa and India are seeing it the same way, because that's not their lived experience or their reality. So it's a fascinating time. It's a fascinating topic. I think we could talk forever. But I want to congratulate you on the film. I think you told it so respectfully, but it also leaves you kind of challenged, because, I think about Annette not going home and living in isolation and being so incredibly lonely and having her life torn apart. And I think, for what? Because
Absolutely.
some other people in the race didn't like the way she looked. Yeah.
And that's a great point, because her entire life is destroyed to run around the track twice. And and there's the fallout of that. Like, where is sport helping her to, sort of reclaim herself? I mean, of course, Peyoshni has been, just incredibly supportive of all of those women. And she started her new foundation. I think it's called Humans of Sport, that's completely dedicated to, athletes' rights. But she's one person and often doing it without, being paid to do it. And I think that there's a larger conversation to be had about accountability and responsibility for sport. And it's funny. People say, "Oh, you know, do you love sport?" And sure, yeah, whatever. But in some ways, it's kind of broken my heart a little bit.
Mm.